Okay, so this is Paul McGrath, just completed taking a look at the property up here. What's the address up here?
6742 Wedgewood Place.
6742 Wedgewood Place. So I understand there was some concern from a previous report that was done by you guys, where the contractor, not an engineer, but a contractor came in and wrote a very aggressive report, which I have read now. I've been under the house, under the lower foundation and into the upper foundation, and this house is constructed on piles and grade beams. The piles and grade beams are generally in very good condition. There's a couple of little areas where maybe the rebar is exposed that can be patched. The biggest concern with this system is that soil is sloughing from underneath the grade beams. Now this can give the impression that the foundation is undermined, but it's not. It's not a structural issue. It's more, frankly, it's more of an issue of critters getting under the house. And there is something living under here. So I can see the droppings under the house, under the upper floor space. So, because when those gaps are formed, as the soil sloughs down the slope, then rats and critters and stuff. Yeah.
Termite company said there were fleas under the house.
Wouldn't surprise me. If there's something living under there, it probably could be fleas.
We had
too.
one that died.
Okay. Now what's happened is over the years, maybe before you guys were here, somebody's attempted to try and fill that gap in a kind of a crude way by putting concrete under there, not to support the grade beam. The grade beam derives its support from the vertical piles that go down through the soil into the bedrock. And the vertical piles are then tied together by what we call grade beams, which are beams, horizontal beams of concrete with a lot of steel reinforcement so that it can carry the weight between the piles, the weight of the house between the piles. I didn't see any signs of it, as I said, any signs of distress at all in those grade beams. The focus should be, I think, number one is upgrading the seismic, and that's typically something as a voluntary improvement that the buyer would normally take on. The grade beams are running down the slope at the top of sitting on top of the soil. Today, when you do them, they make you step down. So you've only got steps going down. They don't have the grade beams running down the slope. To compensate for that, normally a structural engineer will say, let's double up on the bolts. So you get the extra anchorage because the grade beams are sloping as opposed to being vertical. It's a simple, relatively simple upgrade. They've added some bolts here. There's not enough of them, and they've braced some of the cripples with plywood, and they haven't put ventilation holes in, and they haven't put the hardware in. It's a job that probably should be done. It's got nothing to do with the grade beams and the foundations. It's purely a seismic voluntary upgrade that the buyer can do or not do. It's up to them. There's no requirement to do that. As far as I'm concerned, I think this foundation looks fine. I don't have any recommendations. I know you have a geo coming out. It'd be good to have Dave Grover's opinion on it. Obviously, a foundation system on piles and grade beams that was built 60 years ago is not going to meet current requirements. But you're so far ahead of the game being on a house that's on piles compared with some contemporary houses or even older houses that are on grade, that the house is performing fine. You walk through the house, there's no signs of any settlement, and any sloping floors, other than sense that the house is shifted or moved at all. So I would focus on the seismic, and I would focus on maybe doing a better job to try to seal the gaps that are forming underneath the house.
What about this part?
You can, as you go down the slope on this side of the house, on the east side of this house, you can see there's some erosion scars. It looks like water is spilling down the sidewalk and simply spilling down the side of the house. You can see there's a mark there on the edge of the sidewalk that was previously a curve, a deflection curve. It will push the water back to the street. And I simply think you need to replace that. I'll put a high. If you look at the neighbour's property next door, they've already done it. And I would do the same. I'd make it maybe 8-10 inches high to deflect all that water. Make sure all the rain gutters are coming to the front of the house. There's you don't have any concentrated water draining to the rear because that can cause erosion and build up, and obviously you have property below you, you don't want any water to go to it. This is the main pinch point here. I think this is probably where most of the water is. I want to make sure that all the rain gutters go to the street. The roof line is above the street level, so if any of them need to be redirected, that can be done very easily. That's it.
Beautiful.